Hello everyone, Murray the Pie Man here to talk about M.A.X, Mechanised Assault and Exploration. Now, I'm doing this slightly differently. This is not going to be my standard Let's Play. What I'm trying here is to do the thing where I record a narration and then play it over the video. So you've kind of still got me talking and video, but this is actually recording, so I won't be showing games as they play. It's trying something a bit different. It's a lot more effort for me to do, so it takes more editing and more stuff. But if it works out well, let me know, because I might try to do more of these. There's a few other things that I'd like to look at which would maybe work better in this format rather than my standard Let's Play. To give you a bit of background on this game, it was made in 1996 by our old friends Interplay, who were a decent, or at least I thought quite a decent company back then. They did a lot of stuff. They did what we last watched, Star Trek 25th Anniversary. They were responsible for that. And they were responsible for this. Now, this is a strategy type game, and while it can run in a kind of pseudo real-time thing, it was actually still turn-based. Now, this was after the release of Command and Conquer, which it's really, and in fact it was released in the same year as Command and Conquer Red Alert, so it was very much, it seemed a bit behind, and indeed that was one of the things that a lot of people criticised of at the time, was that this was a turn-based game in an era where now we were all playing real-time strategies. So what you can see here at the moment, I've played a couple of games and I've tried to record them at interesting points. Now, this is the intro, so this is telling you what the game's about. I remember seeing this at the time and I was quite impressed, and actually there's quite a neat feature in this, as they kind of do an interesting thing to make it, well, basically give you a background of it. So again, got this running all the time. Shut up and let you watch the intro.
The faction's entire population. Their alien sponsors promise them a new world on which they can thrive. All they have to do is fight for it. While most of their population rested in stasis until they could be called to colonize, specially selected members of each group became the leaders of the robotic forces that would create the beachhead on the new world. But humans cannot withstand the rigors of hyperspace without radical surgery. The selectees' central nervous systems were removed and placed in a protective capsule of alien design. Only the hardiest and most selfless of the refugees could tolerate this drastic procedure. The result was the M.A.X Commander. Others of the refugees, acting under alien direction, made the seed ships that would take the M.A.X Commander and his carefully selected beachhead force to its destination. Commander, a human brain safely insulated from the terrors of hyperspace, linked to robot interfaces that would control the seed ships through the hyperspace journey and ensure the clan's colonization of the planet. Suitable planets were chosen. The seed ships sprang forth from the gigantic colony ships, racing towards the prospect of their new home. Arriving in the new system, each clan found other seed ships already there. To take this system, they must fight as proxies for alien sponsors to determine the new master of the planet. M.A.X commanders ordered factories intended to build terraformers and eco-constructors to build the machinery of war. Enlisted in the power games of the Concord, the only chance of survival for the clans of humanity is to fight for and win these planets.
New units. An expired unit is gone.
So yes, as that lovely pre-rendered intro, I do like these old 90s intros, showed us, you play the part of a brain in a jar, coming from a slightly unconvincing CG bloke, which, to allow you to travel through hyperspace while everyone else is put into some form of sleep, is put into a robot body, because being a brain in a jar, you are still wanting to rely on having things like hands, feet, etc. So that's you're then blasted off to a planet where you have to use mostly robotic machines. So what you're seeing me controlling, the things that you see me putting that little whirly screen at times, and all the units that are moving around, are meant to be remote control units. There's one whirling around now, one of the boats. You get to control these, build a colony, defend it, and build an army. But the idea is that there were various alien races, or a sort of conglomeration of aliens, and they like you to compete to take over the planet and get the resources. So they're kind of going to make you fight for it. Now, one of the things I was kind of speaking over it, sadly, in the intro, they do talk about the fact that you were the unwanted, the ones no one liked. And that's kind of one of these features of it, is that the people who, basically, the background, the manual for the games fleshed this out a bit more. And one of the things it said was that a race of aliens came up and asked Earth, do you want to come and colonise planets for us? And they said no. And then they asked basically all the people who weren't in charge, people no one really liked, said, do you want to do it? And they said, yeah, go on. So when we look into the factions, you'll see they're not always the nicest people, because it was the 90s, dark and gritty. Now what you're seeing here is a different thing. This is one of the scenarios, and this is one I quite liked. This scenario was called The Wall, and it was one player versus the computer. So as well as a story mode, the game also had these scenarios, and this one was, they put you in with one of the factions who specialised in armour, and a faction who specialised in defence. And you've got to charge through this wall, so they've used a whole load of the repeated blocks there. You can see are concrete blocks. We've got a lot of concrete blocks, a lot of turrets, but what you get is some very hardy tanks. There's also mines in there. And what you've got to do is you've got to try and advance through it. I picked this one because it's more action-packed. The problem with a lot of the footage I picked was, it's like any strategy game, about the first 10 minutes are just you building stuff. It's not really combat or anything like that, so I thought this gives you an idea of how they tried to make the combat a bit more real-time. So what happens here, as you can see, is when something gets in, so all these circles going around it were range. We'll go back to that, we will come back to that in a bit. So this is just looking at the menu, that's your intro menu. Various buttons, and it goes through, there's various game modes. There was the usual, there was even online play, but there was a story, there were scenarios, there were various things. I'm just trying to see what's coming up there. Just going through the options. So, yeah, we had various factors there, stories. You had online play. That's the main campaign, which you only get parts unlocked. You've got this really neat mission beacon. You've got these lovely backgrounds. I really wish, one of the things I've always wanted to expand out from the backgrounds was what they actually said, because there were really nice pictures, what the pictures actually were. That one I think was an attempt that went wrong, didn't quite occur. So there you got the intro pictures on. Again, you get these nice pictures just in the inset there, and I really like that. So again, something I wish they had. So I think, but we'll see. Yeah, so those are the scenarios. Like I say, the one you saw a bit of the wall there. Various different things. These were kind of little challenges. So it would be, you have this situation. Again, you've got a big description there. You are of this clan. You get to and you've got to do a certain thing. So, for example, that the wall, I'll explain the wall one a bit more when we get back to it, but there are various things. You can see a description there of the different challenges, and you can see there were quite a few of these. This was to give it extra playability, so as well as you having the main campaign, you also have these little challenges, and what they were quite good for was, for all that the game had not much in the way of a tutorial, these things were good for honing certain skills. So some of them might be focused more on infiltration and stealth, whereas others might focus on heavy units, or just doing things a certain way. That gave you kind of a good look at some of the things you could actually do with the game. And again, those were just other sort of challenges and that sort of thing, situations. So there were, like I said, there was actually, for all the game itself is fairly basic, they actually tried to put a lot of stuff in back in these days. Just a lot of things to keep you occupied. To, as I say, when you're spending your money on the game, they wanted you to think you had as much as possible. There's kind of the story scenario. So the idea with the story background is that some of you want free of the aliens who are sort of controlling you, basically your alien sponsors. Some of you want to be in charge yourself, but the problem is it's become a 50-50 split of the factions, with some of them wanting to stay with the aliens and not willing to rebel, and other ones doing it. So you're trying to find an edge, because the problem is everyone has roughly the same stuff, and you rely on the aliens for quite a lot. So again, sadly, I'm watching this in a little inset screen, so I can't actually read that text. It's too small for me, for my narration. One of the things I'll probably look into when I do this again, I will look into getting a bigger screen there, or different ways of adding narration. I'm doing this all through Windows Movie Player. So this was an intro. This was the idea of when, it being the story, you actually got a little CG. It doesn't actually, well, it does a bit, because the first mission involves stealth, but submarines are a fairly minor part of it. But that's the submarine unit. What I liked about this was, considering real-time strategy games at the time were short in animation, so what you'd usually get is like a view of the units, over the top, or from a top or slight angle, and so it was nice to actually see them rendered as 3D models. Again, at the time, even if the game programmers could have rendered them in 3D like this, there's no way my old P75, it could barely cope with this game as it was. It could never have actually done coped with that, but it's, like I say, it's a nice wee thing. We get to there's no dialogue in it, it's just some battleships, a couple of escorts, and submarines fire a torpedo, and as the old game saying goes, bam, sunk my battleship. I actually did like those designs as well. All the surface ships have kind of got this sort of pontoon design. It's more of an hydroplane, which I thought was quite neat. Just one of those things that entertained me. So, one of the things I said about this game was that it kind of tried to simulate real-time strategy. So again, we're just going through. What I'm doing here, I'm looking at those stats, this is again, when you started any sort of game, just a competitive or player versus computer, just a sort of standard from the start game, you set your resource levels, and what they had is they have all these different planets that you're exploring. Now, the only real difference with the planets is, do you have green, brown, or white land, and blue or orange water? But they have these different, and the idea is that having different land layouts can actually make, depending on how many players you have, it can actually make quite a difference. So again, lots of islands means you're going to have to focus more on water-based units, Lots of land means land, and again things like that one, which is all the land around a pond in the middle. That's going to probably involve you meeting your enemy more sooner rather than later, whereas some of these ones where all the land's tucked into the corners means you're probably not going to meet your opponent for some time. There you go, the representation of CPU or computer. And here's each of the factions. So what you have there, that's the Chosen. They were religious fundamentalists. Now, one of the ideas is the aliens didn't really know who these people were, so all the religious fundamentalists in one boat. The skull logo next is Crimson Patch. Crimson Path, I can never remember it, I can't see it from here. They were all the communist factions. The sort of eyeball with the eagle was von Griffin, and they were all the sort of, well, they sort of said all the Nazis, but specific all the racial purists. So quite weirdly, they got all the Rachel purists. Yeah, all the Rachel purists, the people who wanted Rachel never to have met up with Ross and friends. That's the actual idea. No, all the racial purists, and put them all on a ship together. So these are the ones that made it, because imagine they again, one of the things is that the people on the ships killed themselves. Ayre's Hand are a kind of extreme anti-Aboriginal group. Actually, they were obviously a big enough group not to get lumped in with the rest of Von Griffin. Musashi were a Japanese group who lived by the way of the samurai, which you might think, oh, that's not too bad, but do remember there was a lot of feudalism involved in that. That one, so I can't remember who they were, or were they the Chosen? No, they weren't the Chosen. I can't remember what their background was. Sadly, I don't have the manual. Incidentally, from that, the Chosen were better air units, Crimson Path sea units, Von Griffin were stealth, Ayre's Hand were missile, Musashi were armoured, they were fast units, the Seven Knights were medieval knights, and they did very much defence, and the last one there is Axis Inc. And Axis Inc., when he clicks it, they were a company who decided they'd join up, so a whole corporation decided they'd want to join up and go off and play with the aliens, and Axis Inc. Then obviously they probably didn't fight. Well, there probably were a couple of corporate takeovers, but they didn't. So what I'm doing here is I'm picking a faction. What I'm setting up is what they call a hot seat game, and this was where the game really came to life for me. This was probably the most fun I had with M.A.X. So this is something you couldn't do with the slew. At the time, the big trend was everything was real time. The turn-based strategy was a thing of the past. That's something you didn't do. In this one, because it was turn-based, you could actually have a game where you played against your friends, but you could all sit at the one computer. Now, this was the 90s. There was internet, but it wasn't common. Not many people had it, and if you had it, you were tying up your parents' phone line. So a strategy game online was unlikely. So what I'm doing here is for each. So I've picked 4 factions. Another thing that I could do with a hot seat game, if you didn't have many friends, or if you just liked playing the game, but like me, weren't very good at strategy games, you could just play against yourself. And I had a lot of fun. This is actually where I sunk the most hours into M.A.X. I could never get the hang of the campaign or the scenarios, but against me, that's an opponent I can beat. So what you did was you had to equip your landing craft. So these are what units you're going to take down onto the surface. You can see you've got a supply of gold, and also some of them I'm putting materials onto them. So the idea is your construction units, what they call engineers and constructors. You can also get some transporting units, but you'd fill them up with materials so you can actually build from them. So you've got something to use to build with before. You also got gold there, and one of the last things you're seeing me doing is the remaining gold, because you've only got a certain amount, you can also use to upgrade your units, and that's one of the things you can do once you're down. You can mine gold and then buy upgrades. It's one of the 2 paths for upgrades. The other one is research. So when you start getting people down, you can put them in a lab and start having them research upgrades, and that's the idea. You then pick your start point. And I've cut out where I did this for the other 4 factions. But that's how you'd start, so it's basically everything's been dropped on the ground. Now that thing there is an assault gun, there's a constructor, and I'm giving you a nice little... That was something, again, look, we were easily impressed, but there was a little 3D model which could spin. Now you won't see that model on the track. That's what you'll actually see on ground, is what you see there. Very much a straight over the top view, as was very standard for the real-time strategies of the time. It was either right over the top or slightly at an angle to give you an impression of depth, but this was an easy way. This is basically this was one step away from some of the older ones, which had basically you had a grid and you had a picture of a unit which moved, like in old Civilization, for example. What you can see there, this surveyor unit, this is how you find resources, and you can see it's highlighted the 3 resources of the game. The one in white is raw materials, which you use to build stuff. You can see there, raw materials. Again, in the mining stations you could manage how much you mine of everything. Fuel, you need to power generators, which powers everything, and the last one, gold, won't come into later. So again, I've got a mining station there, and a generator, and I'm now moving. So these little units, they're scouts. So this is me getting an idea of what's around. Again, I'm on some sort of desert. Now that there is an alien derelict, that's something you could switch on. So these are weird alien tanks, and there's a tank, an assault gun, a plane and a gunship, and a gunboat. And these were dotted about, and the idea was that once you developed infiltrators, which are one of the units you get when you get people on, you could go, there's an attack jet, you could go and get these units. Now they were quite good. The attack jet in particular was useful because unlike your aircraft, it could attack both ground and air. You had a different aircraft for attacking the ground as for attacking air units. And that was one of the things. There was a certain units could only attack air, certain could only attack ground, and they kept that division. And that was quite a handy thing. The other thing these would do, but it was dicey, particularly with delicate units like planes, was you could actually, they would adapt. So if they survived an encounter, they would gain experience, and so for instance a tank could get a thicker hide or do more damage. So they were worth keeping around and worth getting hold of. What you saw me do with the surveyor there, they could be set to auto. It was a bit iffy. Sometimes it meant they wandered randomly, and you sometimes had big patches of ground which you were wondering why has no one surveyed that, whereas the thing is up in the top corner surveying bits of ocean. So there's me beginning to build. So you're beginning to build your complex, your base. Now one of the things that I have to do is put a power generator in for everything, so there's me making sure everything's powered. You can also build a bigger unit called a power station, which will build more. It generates more than, it takes up 4 spaces, but it actually generates more than 4 generators, so they're kind of your long term. Your generators are quick to build and good for short term. Then you build your power stations, although everything still kicks in, providing everything's connected together. There's your heavy vehicle plants. You've got a plant for light vehicles like scouts, engineers, heavy vehicles, air units, that builds your aircraft, and there's also a sea units plant, a shipyard, which builds, they call it a shipyard rather than a sea units plant, but that builds it. There's your gold refinery. Once you get gold, you've got to refine it, and that's what you use for that. There's one of the, again, because we've got land, sea and air units, there's your storage for land units, a depot, that's where you upgrade them. There's your air units, and there's your dock. That's a habitat, that's when you're beginning to get people. You need, that's basically a person generator. There's your research centre, that's your other path like I mentioned, and there's your ecosphere, that's how you win the game. And there's a training hall and barracks. Training hall and barracks generate your soldier and your infiltrator. The ecosphere is actually how you win the game. Most games you can win it one of 2 ways. One is to wipe out all the other players, but one of the others is actually to have the highest ecosphere rating at the end of the game. And that basically means you've colonised the planet the most. So it was an interesting thing that if you could set yourself up in a corner and defend the hell out of the game, you actually had a good chance at winning if you could get ecospheres up very early, because it was cumulative. So the minute you had one ecosphere, you got basically points for having an ecosphere up. Now obviously what you didn't want, if I'm setting up in this corner with are they the Chosen? I think they are. Not Chosen now. If I was setting up here with them, what I don't want is for another player to take over the entire rest of the map, because if they've got hundreds of ecospheres, then just because I'm happily locked away in my corner doesn't really make a bit of difference. There's my assault gun, here's its alien equivalent. There's your alien tank, and there's an actual assault gun. So again, I'm setting quite a few to sentry. That's one of the things that you'll see a bit later when you see some combat, is if you've got units set to sentry, then each unit, you'll see sometimes when I switch them on, they'll have rings around them showing the firing range and scanning range. So for instance, these assault guns, they're fast, and they've got a good long firing range, but they don't have a particularly good scanning range, so they quite often need to be teamed up with scouts, or there's also a unit called a scanner, but it's quite slow, but longer range. So again, one of the things you could do in the game was, if you were actually attacking an enemy and trying to bring in units like these, was you'd bring in scouts and assault guns kind of working in tandem. The scouts doing the spotting and the assault guns doing the long range fire, but both units were quite delicate, whereas something like a tank, for example, can take a lot more punishment. So yeah, there's the yellow ones, the scanning range, and the red one's the firing range. So you can see this gun can actually fire further than it can see. So that's the idea, is to make you have to team up units, and consider that, again, it's to give it an extra little bit of strategy. Which I liked. And again, I'm just experimenting. You can put grids on, you could set it to show things like the unit's name, its status, it depended on how much. I generally didn't like too much info. I actually didn't really like having the survey on, if I'm honest, but it's a particularly early game, it's very necessary to have that. But I know some people, some of my friends when I played, they like to have all the things up. So there's, again, I wasn't wanting to show you 4 turns of just things building, but you can see after a few turns I've now got more sites for mining, so you can see there's one that's going to be primarily fuel. Now your mining stations can only cover 4 squares, so it starts making you think of which ones am I going to drop, what's worth mining, and it does again all these. What I liked about it was, for all that it wasn't maybe the most complex game, you did get all these little bits of strategy, the little things that you should consider. You know, you don't just keep through. You don't want to spend all that fuel running a mining station just to pull out a small amount. So for example here, I think on a building here it'll be a generator, because again the facilities I'm building there take longer to build, so it's again something you've got to look at. And again, what you don't want to do is you don't want to build over things that you're surveying. Now one of the things Scouts and Engineers were 2 units in the game which were actually amphibious, so and Surveyors as well. Those 3 units could actually travel on land and water, which again was a rarity. You can see here I've seen an enemy scout, so you see there's one of the other teams that I put in here. Now they're all being run by me. This is a hot seat game, so there's not some nefarious opponent, but again we can see each other but we can't shoot each other. So this is where I'd maybe bring this is more me setting up a stall. If this was another player, I'd be making sure that I'm getting the big guns down to make the other player think twice. Now interestingly, if I brought that big gun down and had something in range and then hit its sentry, it wouldn't actually fire. The opponent would get a chance to leave, but the minute that unit actually fired or moved, and if it stayed in range, then it would be fired at. What you saw there was that I was taking out the remove, because if you're not careful you can sometimes trap an engineer when you're building lots of these small units. There's me, I've trapped one, so I can't actually get that one in the bottom corner out. So what I'm going to have to do is demolish a unit. And what I quite liked was they didn't just do a delete, you had this little arm and detonate thing. So again, it was a nice touch. And you can see there's some stuff in the ground there, so what I can actually do with that, I can build a unit called a bulldozer, which will dig that up and give me the units back. But initially I've lost them, because that's basically, this was your own fault. And what I'm doing there, these are storage units, so once this mining station stores a certain amount, but once it gets up to that, it just sits, so it won't actually accumulate more. And that's the same with fuel. So what you can start doing, if you want to have a lot of materials, you can start building these stores. And the idea is if you get a big store, when we get the actual facilities for building, you can speed up how they build but make them use more materials. So if you're, say, readying for an attack or under attack, you can actually start running everything to really spew out a lot of vehicles at the cost of this, if you've got a big store of materials. So again, it was one of those nice little parts of it. Again, little bits of strategy which I liked. So this is me back to the wall, so this is actually earlier in the scenario you saw. You can see what's happening here is this is very much an example of the action fire. So as things are firing, anything that's in range, so any of those turrets that are in range of one of my units that fire starts firing. Now the three lengths of turret, if you will, that are happening here, and if we're wasting the missile launchers a bit here, what I wanted was to try and get all these things to fire at the tanks, because the tanks can take the hits. But the missile launchers have the longest range and most damage, but they're quite a delicate turret, whereas those ones at the very front are your gun turrets, which are quite sturdy, but don't deliver nearly as much. In the middle you've got your artillery, which is the middle, and any defence should have a combination. But we've also got these concrete blocks, and the thing is that I can't move all my units towards the gun turrets without destroying these concrete blocks, so effectively I've got to weather all that damage. And what I was doing with those missile launchers was trying to detonate the mines, because those rocket launchers rather that I was using that sadly got mostly destroyed there, they affect an area, so while they don't do much damage, they affect, I think it's 6 squares, which actually does make a difference. So my strategy here is actually to try and move these tanks as far forward as possible, crack holes in the wall, but also take out all the defences, because what I don't want is to be coming through that wall and have everything wailing on me. Now at the back there you can see in front of the missile launchers I've got radar as well, and again that's another thing that I want to keep an eye on, preferably take out. So that's me. What I've got now, those red bands are the range of all the things that can shoot at me, and the yellow ones are where they can see. So what I'm obviously trying to do is, in this one, actually what you're doing, this is an attrition war, and you're just trying to slug it out. Now the real strategy which you use in this, if you're ever having a go at this, and again this game is available in GOG if you want it, your real strategy is actually to use a different unit called a repair unit. And this is what I twigged about halfway through playing this. If you move your repair units right up, the guns will spend themselves. The guns can only, usually those guns only have 2 shots. You can upgrade it, but normally they can only fire twice a turn, and they'll fire on the first thing that moves or shoots at them, because they're reacting. Again, it's the way the computer reacts, it's the way the game is built. And so in this you take advantage of that, and what you do is you'd move all your tanks forward, but providing the tank doesn't get destroyed, you can then run in this thing called a repair unit and completely repair your tank. So effectively undo all the damage and then just keep moving it forward. And once I worked out that was the strategy, the level became, this scenario became a lot easier. And I think this is why they're in here as well, is to give you ideas and effectively ways of gaming the semi-real time. Now obviously that wouldn't work in an actual real-time strategy game, because units would have a rate of fire and you'd just be waiting for, you'd be then having to try and protect a repair unit. But with this pseudo real time that they used, because the idea with this is actually playing simultaneous play. So one of the things you could do with the computer or online is you could play simultaneously. Now what you might see in the top corner of this, you've got the you've got your end turn button, a turn number and a turn timer. So if you're playing against the computer or if you're playing against a human, what you'd actually do is you'd limit how long you could take for a turn. So you might say you're only allowed 5 minutes to make all your moves, and you turn it off to the end. You see here all these launchers wailing on the tanks. Cracked a bit more of the wall though, so there's not that much fighting. They've also got some vehicles assisting. And what I'm now trying to do is take out the last of the defences and crack this wall. I've got to destroy my... At the end of this level, the objective was to destroy all their ecospheres, so that's my goal. But if I can wipe out their entire base, that's a bonus. And yeah, one of the things is with this kind of pseudo real time, they did this idea that you have a turn timer, so you could only spend 5-10 minutes. That would be an agreement to make your turn. But if you were playing online, or if you were playing against the computer, the gist of it was that you couldn't then have an opponent spend an hour and a half making the turn. They were limited, and you could actually set that in hot seat as well. If you had a friend who liked to look at everything, or took ages and ages in their turn, wound you up, you can sit there and say, right, we're leaving it, you can take 10 minutes, and that gives you again a bit of an extra hell get things done. So it gives you a bit of the intensity of a real-time strategy game, where suddenly your enemy can swarm you, but you still got this turn-based element, which again was quite a nice idea. I think, to be honest, what I think they did was they built a turn-based game in this. They'd built it initially to be solely turn-based, and then, I mean, the original Command & Conquer I think came out in 94, 95, and so this would have hit 96. They were probably already most of the way through their development, and all of a sudden they realised they've just developed what's effectively last year's game. And so they came up with this kind of pseudo real time, but actually I think it gives it a lot of charm. And I mean, I'm a big fan of turn-based. I've got to admit, I'm not always thinking that real time is the best. There you go, there's an attack, but you can see at this point I've cracked a hole in their wall, and the missile launchers are gone now. There's a second line of defence. They've not just defended this wall, there's a second line, but you can now see I can get my units out and into their facility. So this is where, effectively, if I can keep my tanks intact, and make sure that I've got enough things to attack the enemy, then I will be able to win, which will be quite good, obviously, because it makes me feel clever. What we've also moved up there, you might see supply trucks now and again. So these were, again, initially just a way to move. There was a supply truck, a fuel truck and a gold truck, and all of them could initially move their respective resource, but supply trucks had an extra feature, which was that they could reload units. So again, units had limited ammo, and so you had to keep them resupplied. And again, you've got to consider it in every. It's not the only real-time game to have the concept of supply in it, but it added an extra, to me, an extra level of strategy to it. You know, that it's just an extra level, an extra thing you think about. You've got to think of supply lines. Yes, you could land a whole load of tanks on the enemy's shore, but how are you going to repair those tanks? How are you going to reload them, rearm them? and it did. I mean, again, nothing that other games don't have. It wasn't unique to Max, but it was something I rather enjoyed about it. And again, it was that it gave you a bit of strategic depth, which is always nice. Now, to be honest, you do hear me talking about strategic depth, but you have to remember that I like strategy games, but I'm not good at them. So when I say strategic depth, what I mean is it's enough strategy for me, and it was enough that it made me feel clever without without it being so easy that it was dumb. But I'm sure if you got some of the people who really play things like Command and Conquer, I think they'd have probably found Max. And indeed, I think from the way it's sold and from the few, there's not many people who do actually remember this. It's got a very short Wikipedia entry, let's put it that way. From that, I can make a guess that it never really hit the Command and Conquer players. And again, this is kind of your downside. You built this game, Command. Now, whether they built it just before Command and Conquer or whether they had the idea, I think probably Command and Conquer gave them a lot of inspiration. But you are suddenly looking at, oh hell, they've got the better. I mean, there is no contest. Command and Conquer is the better of the two. But for my personal preferences, I find more fun playing this because I can play it at my own speed. Like I say, I've never been a huge fan of real-time strategy. I do prefer my strategy to run turn-based, and so having the turn-based option is really quite fun. This is again, I've made a bit of a jump forward, and we're taking it in the ecosphere. There it goes. So that's me one now. I can still right. I think the game had I think it was 50. It could have been within 50 turns, because again you could also set a turn limit. So you could set at the end of your turn limit what do you want, and there you go, there's their ecosphere rating down. But mine's not up, I've got to have a better one, and I suddenly remembered, yes, they gave me an ecosphere and I had to switch off a bundle of things like the gold refinery to power it. But now that I've done that, that should mean my ecosphere rating is better. I think I remember that very near the end of the game. But yeah, I think I had to switch stuff. Yeah, it's just me checking the status of my little complex there. But I think this is basically the end for the 7 nights here. Just about. I'm not sure how much it let me mess up their facility, but you should be able to see. I think I was trying to get this bit recorded so you can see the end game, how it finishes. It was quite fun. So what do I think went wrong with Max? Well, I've kind of covered it. There were better games out there. Like I say, Command and Conquer's the Command and Conquer shaped elephant in the room, and it was a real-time strategy game. It established itself, came out a year before this, and you could see, and Red Alert was around this time this as well, so you could see, given those options, if you'd already played Command and Conquer, and look, here's a game that's a bit like it, but there's also one made by the same people that is another Command and Conquer game coming out, so I can entirely see why this maybe didn't take off as much. And again, this was very much yesterday's news in the new and exciting real-time world. This was an old turn-based game, so I can imagine, well, I know, I watched the reviews at the time. I remember it turning up on gaming shows and people saying it was past it. They said, oh, it's a bit old-fashioned. It was, the game itself people liked, and again, all these lovely pictures, people liked the game well enough. It was just, why would you play this when you've got this out? So this is me in one of my Hot Seat games, and again, a bit more advanced. Hot Seat was where I think the game really made its own, because this was a game that I could sit either on my own, playing a game against myself. I get to see all the units, I get to build them, run them about, and at no point do I have to feel like I'm dumbing a thing by playing it on thicky mode. I'm playing against myself, so effectively it's, I'm sure you can make your own playing with yourself jokes here. But that really did make it fun. You can see I'm highlighting, I've got an enemy, I'm highlighting the range of all my turrets, because you can see in this one I've got an enemy at the gate, so someone on one of the other teams is very close by, so I've got to keep an eye on what I can hit, but also what they can hit. So I've got to have an idea of ranges and that sort of thing, because I don't want to, again, in fact, this is the white team there, the grey team are my enemy, so I'm getting an idea of where all their turrets, they've got quite a defensive wall there, and what I don't want to do is randomly blunder a unit into it. If I'm going to attack, I've got to focus it, so I need to know what they can see of mine and what they can hit. And as you can see, they've built some turrets after I've built mine, and this is one of the things you could get. You could actually end up, particularly if you were a bit daft with your radar, you could end up with turrets going up that could suddenly shoot at each other, or particularly when upgrades came in. I remember playing one of these hot seat games, and I had 2 rows of turrets from 2 different ones that had been built at their extreme ranges. They had to be so that the different units didn't shoot at each other. But then over time I'd upgraded, and all of a sudden I think it might have been something daft like a surveyor drifted into the enemy territory, and all of a sudden all these turrets start wailing on each other, which was quite daft. Now, one of the downsides of these hot seat games, so I'm obviously here, the sort of person I'm trying to build a huge hot seat game that I can play for ages and have huge troops. It wasn't that the game was glitchy and would crash because of the number of units, although that doesn't help. It did occasionally choke, it still does. It doesn't always like it. You can see there I'm having to connect. This is me preemptively connecting stuff up so that when a unit's built it doesn't power down. But what you also get is, I believe there's a bug which means that about 125 turns the game will crash. Now, it wasn't picked up on release and it's not been fixed by anyone since, so I'm afraid this version was one I got from GOG, and sadly it still contains the bug, which is a bit of a shame. It's one of those things, if I could program, if I was a better coder, or if I could hack, or if someone ever does want to, if someone watches this and is curious or gains a love of M.A.X, if someone ever fixes it, I'd be really happy. But I don't think that's going to happen. Now, there was a sequel called M.A.X 2, imaginatively enough, and that came in a bundle with this game. I've not recorded any footage of it because it looks horrendous. So they have kept the pseudo-turn. I thought they'd have actually gone real time for it. They've kept the pseudo-turn base, but what they've done is it actually looks worse than this game. I think they tried to give it a 3D look, and they've also for some reason given voices to a lot of the things, which again to me is a computer controlled unit. It's not going to say sir, yes sir. It's a robot ship. You know, they're a robot mine layer ship. It's a robot tank. They're not going to sit there and go, yes sir, thank you sir. So, like I said, this is a hot seat game, so this is now me playing the people I was just playing against. So what you will see here is the rest of that grey team facility, and you can see again on the map all in white, and the greys are a bit up against it because they do also have the green team sitting on their doorstep. So you can see, yes, the green team there, and again the green team, if I remember, were a 7 Knights team, so they're high on defence. Yep, there's the 7 Knights logo, so they're building quite a defence that's going to, you can see there those missile launchers are going to give some issues, but there's a plane coming in, and if we can get enough planes in there, if they don't have the anti-aircraft, although there's an anti-aircraft ship, then I could potentially start causing a lot of damage. And again, that was the idea. If you can fly in with planes and clear anti-aircraft, you can start bombarding ground defences at will. So yeah, that's basically, I mean, this would be kind of jabbering. This is a game I absolutely love for all of its flaws and silliness and kind of pointlessness. I find it really enjoyable, and it's actually really nice that things like GOG are still allowing you to play it even if they haven't fixed the game's inbuilt bug. It's something I can spend hours of my time at, and frequently do. Just for me, it's a really good way to chill it. Just play a hot seat game of this, just run, build. I think I possibly like the building better than battling, although if you ever get a big battle going, you take a huge group of units and just throw them at a defence just to see which one comes out. You know, when you send something like a gunboat or a tank into a nest of gun turrets and just see how many turrets fire before the tank goes, and eventually you get to the point where your gunboat starts surviving and start nailing the other turrets. And it's really nice. And again, when you get very upgraded, so when you get a lot of upgrades in, you'll start seeing, you know, these uber tanks that seem to be shrugging off every shell flying at them, or missile launchers that can, you know, one hit just about anything, and all of that's really good fun. So I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a bit different to what I normally post, and if you liked that, please do like, subscribe, and do tell me in the comments if you liked it, because I'm going to try, if this works out okay, I'm going to try and do something similar. I've got another couple of ideas of things I could do with this, although because it's a lot more effort for me to do, they'll be less frequent. So if you want to, again, like, subscribe, comment down below. If you want to contact me on Twitter, I'm at Pieman70. That's at capital P for Pie, capital M for Man, 70 as in the number 70. So once again, all that remains for me to say is thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it's made some of you want to go and maybe pick up M.A.X again. It'll be a couple of quid out of your wallet. You do have to get M.A.X too, I'm afraid, but we've all got our crosses to bear. So if you want to do that as well, once again, thank you, and I hope this encourages you to watch it. Until then, bye for now.